Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. A little bit allergic in general, but
Oh dear. Is that a pollen allergy thing?
yeah. I've been okay for a few years, but now it's back with a vengeance.
Ah,
Is it just us?
well, we're not going to have Ed, we're not going to have Jeff, and we're not going to have Jude.
Oh,
So we might have Michael, but we don't always have Michael. And we might have, there's Michael, speaking of the devil. And we might have David Menzies, who I called David's home phone. Let me call, since we have Michael, let me call David. I'm sorry, let me call David. There's Michael, how you doing? Yay. I think we're going to have a very small crew tonight and probably a very short meeting, but I want to, I'm going to give Dave Menzies' home phone a call. I called to remind him of the meeting, and he's normally right here. So I'll just see if I reach anybody in his household. Hey, David, this is Laura. I left a message earlier. Tonight is a ZRC meeting. Are you able to join?
I can't get in for some reason. I can't seem to find it.
Well, so Ashley sent the link on Friday. If you look at a July 13th email from Ashley, you should see it.
Oh, I'll give it a try again.
Okay. Well, we need you. You're a quorum.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
I didn't get the link either. I just happened to have gotten the right link from Jude's email that she just sent out tonight.
Oh, okay. So, well, I know that Ashley sent it on Friday.
Yeah, I'm just saying, when I looked for June, you said June 13th, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. It didn't come to me.
Okay. Well, let me find Ashley's and I'll resend it to.
Yeah, send it to Dave, because
Yeah.
that's how I got into this. I wouldn't have been able to get into it unless Jude happened to send that email.
Right. Okay. So forward to Dave. Dave Menzies. So I'm sending that. So my plan is, well, we'll wait just a moment and see whether I get David, and then we'll move on to that. So is anybody enjoying the summer weather?
Oh, the weather is fantastic. I loved it.
Yeah, finally.
Any day, it could be any day it's not 95 and humid. It's a bonus.
Yeah, there you go. And any day when it's not like 10 degrees and icy.
Yeah, right. Anything like this kind of weather's great.
So absolutely. So we'll kind of get going. I'll be repeating myself when David gets here, but anyway, you guys are here, so we can kind of get going. So the only topic I really had, I didn't send out anything before this meeting. The only topic I really had was the Housing Oversight Task Force input from the Zoning Revision Committee. So Ed had sent me an email earlier today and said he would have his input, critiques, he called it. He has some worries about the housing changes, and he'll have some critiques and his thoughts on it available at our next meeting, which is July 11th. And I was just reading Jude's email that says that she isn't, the hope was, and Michael, you and I both know well how big this law is. So to ask everybody to review it in 30 days is a stretch, I thought, but in a perfect world, everybody would, and then we could kind of get going on it. So, but in any event, so people are coming back and saying 30 days is just not quite enough. And Michael, you and Jude are both on the zoning, the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I don't know whether you all have talked, because you're both on the Zoning Revision Committee, but you're also both on the Zoning Board of Appeals. So your input, and if you choose, you could give the same input through the ZRC, and you might give the same input to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But that's kind of what I wanted to get an idea of, is Michael, whether you and Jude, and of course, Michael, you were on the Housing Oversight Task Force, so you've had opportunity to give your input up until now. But even though so have I'm still going to have some input, because some of the stuff was, was solidified at the last minute. And I do have some things already that I'm going to be saying that I think that we need to get some clarification on. So, oh, look at that. We have Jeff. A pleasant surprise, because Jeff thought he wouldn't be here.
The meeting ended early, so it's fine.
Wow. Okay. Well, you make our quorum, so this is really a great thing. And David Menzies is trying to get himself connected. So let me just. So we officially have a meeting. Yay. 6:39. So I was just saying, I did not send out an agenda, but the only thing I wanted to talk about at this meeting was I wanted to make sure I knew who wanted to provide input how. So the Zoning Revision Committee as a committee can give input. Of course, Michael and Jeff and I are on the Housing Oversight Task Force. I'm actually still gonna, and of course I'm a town board member. So when I give my input, I'm gonna give some input as a town board member. And I was just saying right before you joined, Jeff, I do have some input to give, even though I was part of the task force. The last iteration of the document came out, and there were two things that still aren't sitting right with me, and they were kind of like last minute things. So I'm still going to put forth my, some thoughts. So I will be doing that. I'll do it as a town board member, and I don't know whether Jeff or Mike. Well, Jeff, if you were to give input, it would either be as an individual or it would be as part of the Zoning Revision Committee.
Or what were the two things that you're referring to that were at the last minute changes? Because I don't know what those would be. And
okay.
then
So one thing that I had pushed for, and it went in at the very last minute, was continuing care, that we ought to have some way that in Woodstock, a continuing care facility can come in. But what I didn't clarify, when I read the definition of continuing care, and I read the continuing care, just a little paragraph or two in the housing chapter says, if you do continuing care, you do it as a floating zone and is continuing care. But the continuing care definition talks about continuing care being, you can have independent living, you can have assisted living, you can have nursing home. And there's a fourth thing they said, and it discussed continuing care as if it included all four of those things. But I would like to see our law allow not only continuing care that had all four of those things, but if there was a facility that could be just assisted living, which is only one of those things, I think we ought to be allowing, one of the four things, and not saying you have to have a whole continuing care offering. Because Saugerties has the Ivy House. You look at it from the front, it looks like a regular old house, but it was extended in the back a bit. And I would visit somebody there a few years back, and it was very nice. And they had a common dining room and a common meeting room, and it gave all the things. So I wouldn't want us to be saying, well, just because it's not continuing care, it doesn't offer assisted living and independent. And I don't think we should be excluding it. So that's my personal opinion, but I'm going to put it in as a town board member because, and it can be discussed as part of Housing Oversight Task Force, but it's one person's opinion. So even though that's something that I commented on when I saw Nan's last draft, I thought it was appropriate for me to give typos and clarifications in that, but I did not think it was appropriate for me to change the intent of anything because it was just one person's opinion. So I said, when I gave my comment, I commented on it, but I said, I don't expect you to change it now because we don't have another meeting of the 7 of us. So, so don't change it for me. We'll discuss it later when we have a meeting of the 7 of us. So that was the main thing. And the other thing that's my opinion is we do have it so that any housing, you can never, ever, 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 ever have more dwelling units in a building than 8 dwelling units. And I think that in terms of generally that's okay, but I think every rule ought to have an exception. It shouldn't be easy to exercise the exception, but I do personally believe that we ought to have an exception to that. Like if you look at Woodstock Commons, they have a building that I think has 12 units in it. If there's a greater good, and if it's in the floating zone, and there's some, and people have to jump through hoops, I don't think it should be easy to get a building that has more than 8 units. But I think no way, no how having a building, the max can only be 8 units no matter what. I think there ought to be an exception process that's difficult to do, but I think there ought to be an exception process, and that's just my opinion. And I could get shot down. What was that? Was that?
I
Connor?
would agree with that. That makes sense to me. I
Yeah.
mean, especially when we're trying to be efficient about, I mean, you know, I'm reading in these tables all the density requirements we're trying to lift. And I mean, if we're going to open that up, I mean, I feel like that there should be a avenue of consideration for that.
Well, exactly, and nicely put. Yes. So that's what, right. And I may steal your wording.
Go ahead.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. So, and not that it should be easy, because we don't want these, you know, monster buildings all over the place, but there ought to be exactly what you said, an avenue of consideration that, you know, in case somebody had a really good reason that was going to benefit Woodstock. So those are my two things that I'm going to put forward. And I'm also going to be, and I'm still doing one last read of everything. That's where I am. But I will probably submit my input as a town board member. So Connor, you can, I mean, you have the option of submitting your input as a zoning revision committee member or as a planning board member. So Ed plans to come to our next meeting with his set of input. He wasn't ready tonight and he didn't come tonight, but he plans to be ready at our next meeting on July 11th. So Ed could either submit input as an individual or as a zoning revision committee member. And Jeff, you could give your input as an individual or zoning revision committee member. So, and I see you're on mute and you're not on camera, so I'm not sure if you're actually there, but that's okay. So in any event, so I'll want to know, and Jeff, since you were on the Housing Oversight Task Force, you might not have any input at this point because you may feel you're good with everything. And then Michael, you and Jude are both on the Zoning Board of Appeals, so you might give your input as a ZBA member, or you may give it as a Zoning Revision Committee member. But Michael, you may be fine with the law as it is because you were part of Housing Oversight Task Force, so you might not personally have any input. Anyway, I just wanted to coordinate. So Jude said she had input. So but she's not ready yet. She wanted more time. The WEC has asked for more time. The Housing Oversight Task Force is meeting next on June 12th. So what I had emailed Ed was good to be ready to come to our June 11th meeting. And I might ask if it's okay with Ed. I don't know whether he'd rather just tell us his input or if it's okay for me to invite Deborah DeWan and Kirk Ritchie, because if so, then we'll have 5 of us on the Housing Oversight Task Force hearing Ed's input. If he gives it on the 11th and we meet on the 12th at 10 a.m., people won't have a time to digest Ed's input. But if a bunch of us are on the call on the 11th when Ed shares his input, we'll have time to digest it at least overnight. So if it's okay with him, I already sent him an email asking if it's okay with him that I invite Deborah and Kirk. And then Jude says she has concerns and needs more time. So Michael, has the ZBA met and has the ZBA discussed the proposed law at all and discussed when you might review it?
Yeah, absolutely. At the last ZBA meeting, I put it on as an agenda topic. And I let everyone on the committee know that the output was available for comment. And my recommendations to the ZBA members was to look at the law with 2 different hats on.
Mm-hmm.
One hat would be, if the law were implemented as written, do you see any issues that would come before us frequently?
Right.
Things that need to be defined without thinking about the content. Just if it were adopted as written, what might we foresee issues with?
Right.
And then I also said that, well, you're going to have to comment, you know, as your thought process from a town of Woodstock resident. And we may want to consider, if we find things that we all agree on, we could speak as a zoning board. So there are 3 different ways to look at it. Though I do, one of the reasons I came in here tonight was to find out what, you know, I'm assuming as large as the changes were, all the comments are going to be astronomical. And who is tasked with consolidating those, and what format would they like to have them received in?
Well, okay, you asked a couple of questions there and I'll give you a couple of answers. So first of all, I've asked Deborah, Kirk and Deborah, when the law was sent to all of us, it's in a PDF. And it's very hard to respond to a PDF because you can't, it's not like a Word document where you can put your comments right in there. So Deborah was going to send me the Word document. What I'm believing, well, first, so first thing is I'm looking to get a Word document. I think everybody on Housing Oversight Task Force ought to receive the Word document so that we can do comments in the Word document. So secondly, remember there's the ID.
There's a what?
There's an ID. It's the zoning, I think it's zoning revision at woodstockny.org. So, and it's in, I'm going to go back to the website. If you go on the town website and you look at zoning revision, and that's where I'm going right now.
So you're asking for comments to be returned in Word, and that Word document is not circulated yet?
No, I'm not asking you to return it in Word. You can take the
Okay.
PDF. You can take the PDF and send an email and say, page 5, section blah, 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 here's my comment. Page 10,
Yeah.
section blah, blah, here's my comment. You know, you can respond to the PDF. It's just my personal preference is to respond in a Word document and mark it up rather than having an email where somebody has to go back and forth.
Sure,
So
yeah,
that's
no,
my-
that makes sense. Whatever's
Yeah.
most efficient, right? That makes total sense.
So that's my preference, but I don't have it yet. Yes, zoning
But
updates.
there is not a defined format which has been established to consolidate results.
Well, I'm still getting to that. So first off, there's the email that I said, zoning, and it's on the Town of Woodstock website. If you go on the Town of Woodstock website, the bottom thing on the left-hand navigator is zoning updates, and zoning updates at woodstockny.org. So zoning updates at woodstockny.org is the ID. What's going to happen is people have been asked to provide their input by June 30th. I think a lot of people can't, but that was the request. People officially have 45 days and June 30th is a stretch. But so what my vision is that the ZBA, for example, the ZBA will provide a consolidated response. If you get a Word document, you can all mark up a Word you can mark up a Word document, you pass it around, like you mark it up and somebody else marks it up and somebody else marks. So you have one consolidated document. Every committee ought to have one consolidated document. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is
Where would the zoning board get the resource to consolidate the comments into one document?
well, it's kind of the same thing. When we had on Housing Oversight Task
But
Force,
I mean, you could just imagine 7 people sending me PDFs with pages and pages and pages of comments.
well,
You know what I'm saying?
I do. Okay, but let me respond though.
Yeah.
So for instance, and I know that we're talking about a big document and not a smaller document, but when we worked on the watercourse law, and we had a group of 7 working on the watercourse law, right? The
Yeah.
ZRC looked at it, the supervisor said, hey, let's get this group of 7. I was the lead of the group of 7, and the group of 7 looked at the watercourse law, and I sent around the Word document, and this person had it and put their comments in, and that person had it, same document, added their
Yep.
comments.
Yep.
If everybody adds their comments sequentially, then nobody's adding all the comments in. If it's a Word document, everybody adds the comments sequentially, it's
Yeah.
one document that keeps getting updated.
Yeah.
And the same thing, Judy and I kind of did that on Housing Oversight Task Force, where there was one iteration of the document where Judy put her comments in and then sent me the Word document, and then I put my comments in, and then it was a consolidated document, and it went to Deborah, and then it went to Nan. So that's the way I would recommend doing it, is we get a Word document, and then you guys coordinate, you update, now you update, now you update. Now, what I think that you ought to do as a zoning board of appeals is when you have everybody's updates, then you need to go through them, and you don't know until people update them if there's going to be a lot. I'm guessing, Michael, that you're not personally going to have a lot, because whatever you wanted to see, you've been.
Yeah, I've had the chance. Yeah.
You've had the chance.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't guess that you're going to have a lot. So now you're talking
Understood.
about 6 people, right? So how many comments will 6 people have? Well, I guess we'll see. But the point being, when you get people putting all their comments in one single Word document, then you can scroll through it and you can say, does anybody disagree to anything here? Because if there's disagreements, then it would be good for the ZBA to talk about any concept where they disagree. It would be good for the ZBA to work that out, so we get one ZBA response. And the point
Yeah.
there being, we don't want to have a ZBA response where the response conflicts with itself. Well, I hate tiny houses. I love tiny houses. Take tiny houses out, keep tiny houses in. Well, you know, that shouldn't come from the ZBA. The ZBA, if you hate and love tiny houses, the ZBA ought to work that out so that they get one answer about tiny houses. So when the ZBA answer comes in, it's a consolidated and there are no conflicts with what people think. So who's going to get it is going to go to this ID, but this is an ID Ashley receives it, but then Kirk and Deborah are going to pull it off. And then I'm guessing we have a Housing Oversight Task Force meeting on July 12th. And I'm guessing we're going to talk about all of what everybody's feedback is so far. And we don't know whether it's a mountain of feedback or whether it's 2 comments. Yeah, I'm going to submit my 2 comments. It could be all we have, or it could be a mountain of feedback. But Ed is going to provide feedback. And then we get to the Zoning Revision Committee. So my question to you all is, like Connor, for instance, is Connor going to want to submit his input as a member of the planning board, or is Connor going to want to submit his input as a member of the Zoning Revision Committee? Because I'm going to go through the same process with Zoning Revision Committee. Anybody that wants to have their response be part of Zoning Revision Committee, we're going to meet on July 11th. I'm going to look to understand, you know, I'm going to make our deadline all July 11th, and I'm going to want to understand everybody's opinion. And if the opinions conflict with each other, then we've got to work that out. But the Housing Oversight Task Force is going to get all these opinions and try to make some sense out of it. Opinions will come in a couple of categories. One category is going to be, yeah, okay, this is nice. Say the WEC wants to expand the wetland buffer from 100 feet to 150 feet. Well, that's great, but that's not housing. It's going to go on another list. So there'll be some comb through of the comments about, are the comments actually having to do with housing? If so, we need to make a decision on them. Are the comments maybe a great idea, but they belong in a different list and they'll handle later, because we're not going to address the, you know, the wetland buffer. We're not going to address that now. We're doing housing. So, so there'll be some sifting through of the comments that come from all the committees, that sifts through and says, well, what do we need to make decisions on? And then I think our Housing Oversight Task Force is going to have some meetings to make decisions. So committees ought to have a consolidated response. It'll come into the idea that
Can I
yes,
ask,
go ahead.
Connor, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Can you just, how was comments, how were the planning board, what were the instructions regarding comment from the planning board? What were you asked to do there?
Well,
Consolidate, just so I know what they're
we had our presentation very recently,
Yep.
and there weren't any questions. So just to kind of dovetail between the Laura's question, at this point, I would be submitting most of my questions as a member of the ZRC, because the planning element is more straightforward. And,
Sure.
you know, I mean, at least from my perspective, you know, if I had any comments immediately, for example, I would echo Jude's question, particularly about the nature of the affordable housing guarantee. I mean, I see the 60% peppered around, and I wonder why I don't know, why not 70-30? I mean, I see that there's the multifamily dwelling units would not be allowed for long-term rental, but should anyone under this program be allowed to create a unit that's for short-term rental? I mean, this is to address a housing crisis. And the last thing I would add to that is just it doesn't, and maybe I missed it, I was scanning through, but it doesn't seem to have a recommendation in regards to STRs in general. Like, I know there was a question or the ability to raise the cap, and again, we're in a housing crisis, so I don't know if we should be submitting an opinion on that or not too.
Well, you could, but I can tell you the decision that the Housing Oversight Task Force made was to let the STR law be the way it is. We were not looking to, like there was a discussion on ADUs. If you want to put an accessory dwelling unit on your property, should we say, oh, but it can't be an STR? Well, there legitimately are Woodstockers that have trouble paying their taxes, and their one STR on their property saves the day. So the STR law says everybody can have one STR, but people can't have any more than one STR, and that's going to stay. So the thought was, we don't want to kill people who the only way they can live here is by having an STR. We don't want to kill those people.
Two quick things. I do fundamentally disagree with that, in that
Okay.
if you can provide, if you can't afford to live here without an STR, I mean, I don't understand why you can't turn that STR perhaps into a long-term dwelling. But what I'm not saying is taking anything away or overturning the law. What I'm saying is there is a provision that I believe facilitates the expansion of the cap. And that's what I'm talking about, because
Well, I don't think anything expands the cap. I think what we said and what this law says is the STR law stays intact. Right now, it allows anybody to have one STR. Anybody can still have one STR. Nobody can have more than one STR, except for certain housing types are not allowed to have an STR, like if you have a 4-unit.
yeah, but again, it's not a question of what it allows in principle. Like, yes, I could have an STR, but I can't because there's a cap.
Well, and the cap's going to stay, right? And we're still going to use the cap. STRs were getting out of hand, and that's why we instituted the cap, and we drove the cap down a bit.
So I mean, I just wanted to bring that up just as a general, like, will the housing oversight be speaking to the cap at all? That's a question that
I doubt it, because they'll leave that to there still is an STR committee, and it still is the town board that sets the cap. And so the Housing Oversight Task Force is focused on the law itself, and the cap is set by the town board in a resolution. So I don't expect Housing Oversight Task Force to address the cap in the law, because the cap is set by a town board resolution, and Housing Oversight Task Force addresses the law.
Well, then I guess most of my questions are going to just be that about, I'm not as concerned about the density requirements as she was, but again, the ability to provide and the quality and quantity of affordable housing through this, again, affordable is the prerogative. And some of this, as I go through it, I wonder too, will this be able to have the intended effects? But I'll wait. I'll lump that in with her when she gets back and see where we land.
Okay. Well, and I certainly welcome any feedback you want to give through the zoning revision committee. I certainly welcome that. So our plan is on July 11th, we'll hear Ed's input. I'm happy to hear input from you. It would be good to have everybody have documented input so that we can say, what's yours and what's yours and what's yours. Getting back to the conversation with Michael earlier, one way to do that is we all get a copy of the Word document, and then everybody updates, Ed updates it first, and then kind of you put your comments in, and then Ju puts her comments in.
Would that document have to reside in a central place for that to occur logistically?
Well, the way we did was pass it around. I know on the water protection, people passed it around. Every time somebody updated the document, they updated it and they said, well, hey, now my updates are in the document, and they emailed the 7 people that were on that water protection team. And then somebody else would put their updates in and send it to everybody. So it was not in a central place. It just got emailed around, and people just updated it one at a time.
I mean, you could put it in Google Drive.
Yeah, we could. Yeah. So, but the thing is, I'm going to submit my input as a town board member. So we'll have a maximum of 6 people inputting stuff. I don't know whether Jeff will. I don't know whether Michael, if you'll want to submit input to the ZRC. So Connor, it could be you and Jude and Ed, and Jude might want to put her stuff in with the ZBA. She might not want to put her stuff in with the ZRC. So we'll just have to see who's got stuff, but I'll encourage everybody who wants to submit. But then, like I said to Michael before, in the event that say you had a thought and somebody else had a thought and they're conflicting, for the ZRC response needs to resolve those conflicts. We can't have a ZRC response that conflicts with each other. So we'll work, a lot of this has to be figured out as we go along, and I wish we had more time, and we don't. But our next meeting is July 11th. And so hopefully everybody will have their input by then, and we'll get it in as soon as we can. So we'll discuss everybody's input on July 11th, and then we'll figure out a plan of what to do with it then as far as the ZRC. knowing, Connor, that you have the option of submitting stuff through the planning board, and knowing, Michael, you have the option of submitting stuff through the ZBA, but whatever you want submitted as part of the ZRC response, we'll discuss on July 11th. And I don't know whether, Michael, I don't know whether I answered your questions or whether.
No, I'm just looking at it from a logistical perspective, like a purely logistical, how do I put all the comments together?
For the ZBA or the ZRC?
ZBA.
For the ZBA, if you guys have a Google Drive, that could be an option. I would think that I think the most straightforward way is to have communication and send the document around and say, when are you, because when I reviewed the document, well, when I reviewed the document, I actually printed out a hard copy. I have this whole 300-page document.
Well, you know what? There's 6 out of the 7 people on the ZBA asked for printed copies.
Okay. Well, I know.
But we cannot get them.
Well, let me make that request.
No, I don't want to. We were told not to do that.
Well, there you go. Sorry about that. I know I printed mine on my home printer. The town did not print mine. I have a home printer. I actually have a sheaf of 3-hole paper because, luckily, because I have it in a binder, and I ran it through my home printer. So that's what I did, is I printed it myself, but that's not a good solution for everybody. I get it. So do you want me to, who told you no? Do you want me, see, in special circumstances, I think that they didn't want to be, I guess here's the issue. It's 300 pages it's 300 pages. So every time you
It's
print
300 pages, but it's 150 pages back to back. And if you want people's comments and that's how they want to give them to you, I think you should respect that. But that's all I have to say about it.
So, but who told you no? Who told you no that you couldn't have printed copies?
That came from Gordon, which came from Bill.
Bill McKenna. Okay, so I will. So I know in a perfect world, if people could get by without printed copies, I fully agree with the answer.
That's a lot of paper. I mean, I'll just say, in the case of being eco-friendly, like, yeah, why not a Word document?
Well, and right now it's a PDF. So I mean, right now.
Well, you know what, and Connor, I'm all for you. That would be great too, but that doesn't exist. So when you don't have anything to work with, and you ask people what their pleasure is, that's what you get.
Well, so here's the thing. The fact. So let me just talk for a moment. So the fact of the matter is this is version 1. When the House Oversight Task Force hears all of the input, then there's going to be a version 2.
Sure. Yeah. And then more pages. Yeah.
And there'll be more pages. And then once there's a version 2, and people feedback on that, then we'll have a final copy. So I do know if people aren't really going to read it, then we don't really want to print out a document that somebody's just going to throw in the trash and they're not really going to read it. If somebody's really going to read it, and I tell you, I get it, because I do better with a hard copy, and that's why I print it.
Some people like to sit down with a cup of coffee, a hard copy, and a red pen. But they've been doing it that way their whole life.
Well, exactly, and it can be easier to find things. Some people are better with paper, and some people are better scrolling for. So if you've got 6 people who are really going to read it, if they get a hard copy, then it might be worth it to print the hard copy. And I would be willing to talk to Bill. But of course,
I don't think it's something I want to make an issue out of.
But we do need the Word document, because then at least the Word document, you can be making your comments right in the Word document. The PDF is frustrating because you can't put your comments in it. PDF, you have to put your comments on a notepad, which is a nuisance. So I'll remind Deborah. And the other thing too is to do a copy, to print off the Word document today, because this was presented 3 weeks ago and they asked for a 30-day turnaround. So over half of that's already done, and to print Word documents now when they were supposed to already be working on it, I don't know. But in any event, so you've already said not to worry about that, but I will try to get I will remind everybody to get a Word document. So all I would say is then, as far as the ZBA, when you get the Word document, I think the idea of passing it around, everybody
Sure.
can be reading, their online PDF version and making their notes of what they think ought to change. And when they get the Word document, if people will update it one at a time, then you'll have everybody's stuff in there. As long as everybody knows the rule is you don't delete anybody else's comment, right? You just add to it. And then at one of your ZBA meetings, you would then, if there's any conflict, you would resolve the conflict. So that's kind of what I would see. And if you have a Google Drive that you use for ZBA, you could always use a Google Drive. But the passing the Word
We
down,
we don't have a shared drive.
yeah.
And
So,
not to say we shouldn't have one, but we don't have
Yeah.
one.
well, and the issue I see with the shared drive is then you don't know who's going to update it next. When you pass the document around, you kind of know who had it and update. But
Right.
anyway,
Okay.
so
Thank you.
yeah. Anyway, so we are planning July 11th, the zoning revision committee. Anybody on the zoning revision committee can give their comments. I'm going to respond back to Jude to say, you bring whatever you want to forward through the ZRC to the July 11th meeting, and then we'll consolidate. It may not be in time because we have the Housing Oversight Task Force meeting the next day. And whenever I receive, hopefully everybody on the zoning revision committee, if you have comments to be considered, hopefully you'll send me an email with them so that we can show everybody's email. Because I don't know whether for this case, it depends on what you need. You're going to have, Michael, you're going to have a copy of the Word document. I don't know how many things Ed is going to have. He didn't ask for a Word document. So I don't know who has how much stuff. We're just going to have to work it out. So,
Sure.
okay. So it's still mushy. Sorry about that. But I'm interested. So I don't know whether you're going to have comments yourself, Michael, because since you were on the Housing Oversight Task Force, you might not have comments because you've been commenting through the whole process.
Yeah, I would claim to that, and I would be more interested in just helping to get revisions, comments put back together. So,
Right.
We can look at that.
Right. So on our committee, Ed's going to have comments, Jude will have comments, and looks like Connor may have comments. So we'll just figure out how to get those merged in together as best we can. And it'll depend on how many comments everybody has. If they have like a 1-page list, that's manageable. If they have a 5-page list, that'll be a lot to go through in our one meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But I may check, I may make a note to check with people. Take like July 7th. July 6th to 8, see how many comments. And figure out from that for ZRC whether we need to pass a document around or whether people have something manageable list. So, all righty. Any other questions or? I mean, we're in uncharted territory, so I think a lot of this we're going to work out as we go along.
Uncharted in what way?
Well, now we have this 300-page document to review.
I mean,
So
it's very common that documents go out for review, right?
Well, it sure is, but to have a 300-page document go out for review, and it's going out.
It's just that the comments were put in the zoning code in its whole. It's not like there were 300 pages worth of revisions.
Oh, right. Well, so say again, the comments are put in
The changes were put in the document in its entirety. Right, there are large elements of the zoning code that is not being changed.
Well, you're right about that. Right, the housing section is new. Right, and right, exactly.
It's just for perspective. It's put in that full document.
Yes. Well, it's put in the full document because a change here affected something over there, and there's a little.
Yeah, you needed to do that. Totally understand. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's true. But I think having such a massive document, even though, as you point out, it's not 300 pages of changes. It's, changes are focused in it. But I think having it still is a massive document. It still is a lot to digest. And we have a lot of committees who are embracing this and really diving in. So that's my thought is it's just massive because of the interest that groups have. Like, I don't know how many times the WEC has reviewed a zoning update, but the WEC wants to see this one.
Yeah,
So-
sure.
So we have, and this is the first time we've had a zoning revision committee. This is the first time a big change has come out that didn't come from us. And, we're going to be reviewing it, and the planning board and the ZBA. And so I think that we haven't had a lot. The reason why it's uncharted is because, and we also don't know how many changes, what's the size of the feedback that we're going to get. Are people going to have 2 concerns? Or are they going to have 200 concerns? We don't know how big a job it is going to be to create version 2 until we see what the feedback is on version 1. And we don't really know yet all that. So that's what's uncharted. There's a lot of unknowns here.
Okay, yep.
So, okay. So Connor, did you have any other thoughts or questions?
No, not at this time. Let's get the band back together and see what happens.
Yeah, speaking as a musician, there you go. Michael, did you have more on your, I'm not sure if I really answered your questions. I know I gave answers, but I'm not
I was
sure.
just looking, I'm trying to find a uniform way to comment on the document for multiple people, and we don't have it, so I'll make one up. I'll figure it out.
Well, I think the choices are either you pass a Word document around so that everybody adds their updates to the same document.
Right,
So
but
then
you
you
have to
this.
pass a Word document around that doesn't exist right now.
Well, Deborah's going to get it.
I
said,
understand, but we've already asked them to start reviewing.
Correct. So they ought to be making a list for now. They ought to be making a list of their concerns. And then when we get the Word document.
If I could jump in, it just feels like, I mean, whether or not they have expectations of 30 days, we need to get this document and we should just get it and go from there. I mean, there's nothing we can.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. There's nothing we can do about it. You're right. Let's just, as soon as we can get it, let's pass it around.
Yeah,
Perfect.
okay.
Everything else is just extra. I mean, until that's in our hands, like,
Yeah,
let's just
okay.
get it in our hands and see what we can do with the time
Yeah.
we do have.
But part of how you decide what you're going to put in there is going to just depend on how massive the inputs are. If you have 6 ZRC members and 4 of them have 0 input and 2 of them have 2 things apiece, you can do that in one Word document and say, we got these 4 things. So, until you know how massive your input is, you probably can't really figure out how you want to produce it. If you have people that are combing through and finding typos on.
If what you're asking is a formatting question, then I think it's really as simple as like, either in a separate Word document, rather you could just annotate, the page, the section of
Right.
the code being changed, and your comment. I mean,
Right.
then we have individual pages we can go through that are itemized. We can review them as a group, start to cancel ones out that are the same, hash them at ones out that are different, and that way we're not essentially annotating. Like you said, I get that it's not all 300 page of change, but that would be easier, I assume, than to comb through everyone's separate 300 page copy.
Right, which would be a bad idea. It would be a bad idea. Right.
How do you feel about that? Let's say we submit a separate Word document with our annotated list of comments with the page number and section.
I think that's fine. If you have like a page worth of comments, that'll be good. If you have 10 pages of comments, you might have rather put them right in the Word document than having to, I think it depends on how much feedback you have. So I think people will want the Word document if they have a lot of comments. I think that if they just have 3 comments, you can just send me an email and say, here's my 3 comments. So I think you're not going to know until you know how big the comments are people have.
So then let's get that document and we'll go from there. That's next.
Yeah.
Step.
So I'll get the document and I'll try to reach out to ZRC members. I'll try to reach out to ZRC members that July 6th through 8th, which is Wednesday through Friday, because I have some travel coming up. So I think it just makes sense for me to reach out to people one-on-one in preparation for our Monday meeting on the 11th. So I'll just reach out and see how massive people's input is and see for the ZRC, do we need the Word document? And I'll probably send it out to everybody. But the thing that I'm not going to accept, well, I might, I guess, but it's not good to have everybody update their own Word document and send me, I received 6 300-page documents and I got to merge them myself. That's certainly not the but it will be possible.
Yeah.
So we'll just, I don't know, well, I'll just see what I get for the ZRC and I'll just work with it. So it could
Okay.
either be, like Connor's saying, Michael, it could either be each person on your zoning, on your ZBA sends an email with either a Word document or a list that says, this page, this section, here's my comment, this page, this section, here's my comment, blah, blah, blah. You can either do that, but I'll get the Word document as soon as possible from Deborah. But, but if the ZBA wants to submit a Word document, it's got to be one. Don't submit 7 Word documents.
Yeah, I know. I think.
Oh, go ahead, Connor. You were talking, then you went on mute.
Oh, sorry. I said, yeah, I think we got that. We'll speak as
Yeah.
one.
Right. So, and I'll try to get with people towards the end of that July 6th, 7th, 8th week, and then prepare for our July 11th meeting. So, okay, so 1 response per committee. Yeah, could be the Word doc. It could be just a list. Yeah, okay, all righty. Is there any, and Michael, some of it you're just gonna need to work out when you see how much feedback you get. Some of this will just be worked out.
Okay, yeah, I'll at each meeting, I'll, it's a standing agenda item to
Yeah.
consolidate the comments.
So you meet twice a month, right?
Yeah, second and fourth Thursday.
Ah. Okay, so you're meeting this coming Thursday? Yep, okay. Well, and the other thing is that the email that I just gave you, if you're not going to have a ZRC response by the 30th, then you ought to send an email to that ID and say when you are going to have your response. So the request was to have every committee's response in 30 days, which would be June 30th. And if you're not going to have your response by June 30th, you want to alert that ID and tell them when you will have your response.
Alert, what ID? What does that mean?
The one that I gave you, the zoning revision at woodstockny.org.
Yeah.
When your committee communicates your actions regarding this Housing Oversight Task Force zoning code, your feedback ought to go to that ID that I gave you. Zoning revisions at Woodstock.
I wrote that down. So that's what everyone's doing?
Correct. All input is supposed to go to zoning revisions at woodstockny.org. So when you go to your meeting on Thursday, a question that I recommend that you ask is, will the ZBA have a consolidated response by the 30th? Whatever way you want to do it, on a Word document, you each write your own list and send the list of, I got these 5 items, I got 3 items, whatever, or you're gonna be marking up a Word document. However you want to gather your input and consolidate it, will you be sending zoning revisions at woodstockny.org your consolidated ZBA feedback by June 30th? If you're not, then you would need to send an email to that ID and say, like you might say, hey, we just can't do 30 days. We need the full 45 days. We're going to give you our response by the 15th. I mean, you could do that because you have another meeting on the 14th. So if you just can't do 30 days, you need to notify them. Otherwise, they're going to assume you have no input.
Understood. So then I'll put that, together. I mean, it appears to me right now that we won't have the comments done by June 30th if our next, Thursday is our last meeting of the month.
Right. So you should communicate, and I'm recommending that you ask Gordon to canvass the group for a date you can commit to that can't be later than the 15th.
Understood.
Yeah.
Sure.
So yes, because we got to keep this moving, and you don't want to miss version 1.
Understood.
Yeah,
Understood.
so-
Yeah.
Okay. So we got some dates.
I'll ask on Thursday and find out and follow up.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to be available. I am traveling. I will be available by cell phone. So if you need any input from me, go ahead and, you can text me on my cell. So I'll be unavailable on the home phone, but I'll be available by cell phone. So, okay. Anything else we should be discussing here?
I don't
Okay.
think so.
I don't know if anybody wants to make a motion to adjourn. I know we lost our quorum, but anyway, that's okay. So I'll make a motion to adjourn. Anybody want a second the
Second.
adjournment? Yay, Connor. So thank you. So I'll say we're adjourned at 7:24. So,
All right.
Okay.
Have a good night, y'all.
yeah, thank you. And I know, and this is why I say it's uncharted territory, because this is massive thing and it's not a perfect world, and we're all trying to do our best to get our feedback in the dates requested. So we're doing our best. And I thank you all for doing your best with it. So, okay, so we'll talk in a couple of weeks. Thank you, everybody.
See you.
All right.
Bye-bye.